What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Claudia Bellafato holding it down for us in the DraftKings studio in Boston. We got a great show for you guys. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us that 5-star rating, and come check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, wherever you get the DraftKings network. You can also catch the best of Gojo and Golic noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio. Claudia, what do we got coming up today for everybody?
We got a mixed bag for this Friday. Aaron Rodgers addresses a controversial report. We're going to talk some college football playoff expansion and the road to a 14-team playoff. Panic for the Pinstripes. DK's Steve Buchanan offers his take on the state of the New York Yankees and the rest of Major League Baseball. But first, we discussed some trades that happened yesterday. The Bears made their biggest move in free agency, sending a 4th-round pick to the Chargers in exchange for wide receiver Keenan Allen. Allen coming off a career high in passes, second best output of his 11-year career overall. Over 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns in just 13 games, guys. Gojo, how do you like this fit? And of course, we don't know necessarily if it's going to be Caleb Williams or Justin Fields under center, but either way, how do you like this?
I was going to say, it's funny that right now, as we're looking at this roster, and this is probably great news for Chicago Bears fans, Dad, is even quarterback agnostic. Now, I think I'm coloring in. It's the read between the lines thing. I think I'm coloring in Caleb Williams inside the lines for Chicago, and that's what makes me feel even more hopeful about this. But when you look at the offensive line that they've amassed, now adding a weapon like this opposite DJ Moore, knowing you've got Cole Kmet there, you just signed DeAndre Swift. Maybe it was a bit of an overpay, but let's go for it because it looks cool. And all of a sudden, you start to look at this Bears offense, and my immediate dumb thought continues to be, why is them pulling a Houston Texans actually not that likely? This looks like all of the ingredients that we talked about went into exactly what Houston was able to pull off last year, sans the new hot young coach and inserting Matt Eberflus, keeping his job for another season.
Listen, I love what they're doing in Chicago. I mean, this is, and if Justin Fields is going to be gone, which we all still think, even though the market got kind of weird for it, I'm sure there's part of them be like, hey, boy, it'd be nice if all this happened while I was still considered the starting quarterback of the Bears.
Seriously.
I mean, bringing in some of this, they did bring in some, with DJ Moore, but now what you're surrounding him with Keenan Allen and Moore and Cole Kmet has been breaking out as a tight end. And even on the defensive side, re-signing a Jalen Johnson, giving him that money. You picked up a corner, or you re-signed a cornerback. You pick up a couple of safeties as well. So you're working on both sides of the ball. So I love what they're doing. What do the Bears have? 4 picks now remaining in the draft, 19, 75, and 122, but they've already done some work in the offseason. So I think it's big thumbs up for Ryan Poles and what he's pulling off right now for the Bears. And does it make us scratch our head a little bit with the Chargers and what's going on?
So that's the interesting part is not really, because I think we understand, at least in my mind, I understand exactly where both these teams are. The Bears' fortunes all changed last year when at the end of the season, the things started to solidify up front. To me, that was the most important part. If we're looking and saying, all right, what made the Houston Texans who they were last year, and how can that translate to somebody else's equation this season? I do think the underrated part of it, because we're going to obviously make the quarterback comparison. And so you've got to have a blue chip rookie that comes in and goes off. That, yes, I totally understand it. Don't want to discount what coaching did in this either. The culture changed down there. So many things those aren't happening in Chicago, by the way. It's the same culture that you've had around there. It's the same locker room environment that you've had for the last couple of seasons. And so you've got to factor that into all this. And we can talk about some of the weapons around even. But Dad, I look at the lines of scrimmage, knowing that CJ Stroud came in last year and was protected on his side of the ball. But on the other side, that the Texans also had a group up front that could harass some people on defense. They had a defensive line that was able to be stable and just create football that worked in a complementary fashion in a way that we always talk about. The Bears had that down the stretch of the end of last season, and they carry that going into this season with the improvements as well. And so I think because you're going to have a quarterback that comes in, and listen, I was dead ass wrong about this last year with Bryce Young, and that offensive line took a massive step back, and now they've got questions about it in Carolina. But based on what I saw last year with the Chicago Bears and the investment they've made in the position, I don't know, it's hard not to feel good about the foundation they've built in front of them, and then you can build all the rest of this around.
Oh, if you're a Bears fan, you have to be ecstatic. at the direction they're going. I know Keenan Allen's a little older. He's been in the league, 11 years, but still obviously productive when it was supposed to be he and Mike Williams, and Mike Williams got hurt early in the season. It was all on Keenan, and he had himself a hell of a year. But I really enjoy what they're doing there. In a division that Detroit has taken over. There's question marks in Minnesota about the quarterback position. So I think this is been positive moves for Chicago to go in the right direction. So it's just going to be now as they set this up. You're right. The air of C.J. Stroud is going to be in all the Bears fans' head of saying, okay, look, it was a young team with CJ. He's working with a lot of other first-timers, first-time, edge rusher, first-time play caller, first-time head coach. You got some more, veterans on the Chicago team now that you're putting around a young quarterback. So I think there will be expectations, and this is what people do. You see success somewhere else a certain way, and you say, okay, that can happen with us. When I've been using the line over and over again, C.J. Stroud in that situation was the exception to the rule. You are building more veteran talent in Chicago around the young talent that was in Houston. So I don't know if I can, Mike, sit there and say you're going to hit the ground running because you have a young quarterback. So, Claudia, I'm not sure. I like the build, but, it's always like, okay, you got a rookie quarterback. If he's starting, question marks abound until he kind of settles in.
Well, you read my mind, Senior, because I want to bring the odds into this to see really where you guys are at with the squad. It sounds like you like the move so far, and we're sort of looking ahead. And when it comes to betting, that's what you want to try and do to get the best number, get ahead of the market. So right now, if we're looking at the division, the Bears are at plus 320. The Lions are the favorite. Packers not far behind after a decent season with Love. So is now a time where maybe you would buy into the Bears? Because that number is going to go down if they start off strong and Caleb Williams does look good and look to be the number one overall. So are the Bears at plus 320 maybe a little sprinkle for the NFC North, something you do now, Senior?
Yes.
Okay.
In a heartbeat, I would jump on that because there are those that think the Detroit Lions, even though they're best team, people will say they're the Detroit Lions. We've seen them screw things up in the past, years ago. Will they do that again? Though I don't know how likely that is. As I said, Minnesota, losing some talent, getting a little bit back, not sure of their quarterback position. So the Packers, I think, had been going in the right direction from the quarterback position with Jordan Love. So I'm excited to see them. But I'd absolutely, Mike, throw a flyer on Chicago at plus 320. No doubt about that.
Yeah, I would sprinkle judiciously, right? Like this is one of those things I'm not going over the top the way I would normally top things. Just a little spritz on there because I do think what Detroit has built is sustainable. I do think Green Bay is also this is a division right now where obviously Minnesota is going through a bunch of turnover, but for everybody else, there has been something resembling holistic growth in a lot of these places where you've built up enough of a foundation to expect, hey, we can take incremental steps in the right direction. I'd imagine, listen, if we're really predicting it, that's more the likely option for the Chicago Bears, which is dangerous for Matt Eberflus. But, Dad, I know we keep bringing up the rookie quarterback thing, but I also think that, especially in recent years, we've hammered home the idea that so much more of rookie quarterback success is predicated on the environment that they're brought into. Most of these guys are thrown to the wolves in the first job that they get coming out of college, which sounds familiar for a lot of people. But in this case, he's walking in and here, oh, look, there's a stable work culture. The 401k match is great. I know where all the bathrooms are. They got a kitchenette in here. There's mental health counselors on. All this good stuff. Right now, at least when it comes to the roster around him there. So I think there's two things coming off this that are interesting. One involves the Chargers that I want to get to here in a second. The other is now, Dad, what happens with the Bears pick at 9 overall? Because obviously we think, one, they're going to go quarterback here. You just bring Keenan Allen over, but Keenan Allen definitely a little bit longer in the tooth, even if having a pro like that to go with whoever you're breaking in young at quarterback, that kind of player there, huge value add opposite DJ Moore, who did so much for them last year. Now what they do at 9 with that pick, very interested to see, does that stay wide receiver? Do you say, hey, we want to get a young wide receiver if one of the triplets from this class ends up falling down to 9 and we're within range for that, if you get a run on offensive lineman in there? So, hey, if Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors are off the board, do you Roma Dunze this to Chicago? Do you really say, hey, we're going to make sure that we've got weapons? We're going to make sure what happened to Bryce Young last year doesn't happen to our guy this year? Or do you go another route in this, try and add something maybe on defense? I'm not really sure, but I think the rate they're going, continuing to add weapons might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I don't think you can, in this day and age, we see what the wide receiver position has done and how well they've done, especially right out of the gate. You know, I've seen the mocks where the guy you mentioned, Roma Dunze, has been the guy to go to Chicago. I don't think you can get enough weapons for your quarterback, right? Whether it's out of the backfield, running the ball or catching the ball, or receivers down the field. And with this group, I don't know if you can pass that up and say, okay, because you're going to grow with a young quarterback. So how much are you going to grow with a 31-year-old wide receiver who I still think could be productive? Hell, we see Mike Evans, who's in that area, that age, signing the big deal and 10 1,000-yard years. So it's not like it can't be done. But, you know, you're betting on the long haul in Chicago with restarting the clock at the quarterback position. So, man, even if you can get a couple of years out of Keenan Allen, then you'd have one of these young great receivers coming up through. I don't think it's bad at all to keep grabbing, to absolutely keep grabbing offensive weapons for a new quarterback.
No, and again, we're not doubting Keenan Allen. Like, the guy caught 108 passes last year and missed 4 games.
Exactly.
He set the franchise record
this isn't
for
doubting
catches
him.
in a single season and missed 4 games with a heel, which is simultaneously impressive and also worrisome because old player heel injury. Keenan Allen, we've seen deal with hamstrings before, all that stuff. But I'm with you. I think that pairs very well for them going to the future. The Chargers are a little bit more interesting. And, Dad, you mentioned, hey, what are they actually doing out there right now? They're doing what we kind of knew had to come at this point. You had 4 players that were going to carry a $30 or more million cap hit going into the new year, and you just sent 2 of them packing. You cut Mike Williams the other day, who's obviously had plenty of his battles with injury, and then you ship Keenan Allen out here. Now they had restructured Khalil Mack. Joey Bosa has not budged one bit on any of the conversations around him there. But, Dad, as I joked the other day, Justin Herbert, get ready to learn veer option, buddy, because at this point that seems about your best strategy for a team that's devoid of much wide receiver talent right now.
So new head coach, new GM, so they have no association with the guys that had been there for a while. They're moving on, and this is their plan. You know, we knew the plan had to be something like this, right, Mike? You weren't going into, outside of your quarterback, 4 more players with cap hits over $30 million. You just couldn't do it. You know, you need some room to maneuver. So there was going to have to be some changes. And while we knew the defense had to get much better, and we always said, boy, that offense has some talent, that talent is now gone of what we've been used to. Now, again, Mike Williams has been hurt, but Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, you know, and what he brought to that team. So you replace a running back with Gus Edwards coming over from Baltimore. Remember, you lose Gerald Everett, the tight end, who also goes to Chicago, and you replace that with Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst. So, you know, 2 tight ends there. So we'll see how the swap is going there. But you had a feeling the Chargers had to go back a little bit before they went forward because of their cap situation. Now we'll see. We'll see. I think this is I don't want to say a mixed bag year for the Chargers. I think it's going to be a tough year for the Chargers. I really don't see them doing a whole lot, quite honestly, this year. I think they're kind of regrouping from the money situation and then seeing what direction they can go after that.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that was always kind of expected with this job. And if there's anyone that's used to doing things the hard way, it is Jim Harbaugh, and it'll involve just ground and pound punching people in the face until they pass out, and then they'll get to the rest of it when they get past this year. Housekeeping, I was wrong. I saw this reported yesterday now. Tom Pelissero over at the NFL Network detailing that Joey Bosa did, in fact, take a pay cut. So Khalil Mack took a pay cut from $23.25 to $19 million as he restructured that deal, and then Joey Bosa took a cut from $22 million to $15 million, but got his salary fully guaranteed, can get $4 million back in bonus and sack incentives. There's some other stuff mixed in there, but both those rushers are going to be back, both at a little bit less cost here, Dad. But that's not the funniest headline from yesterday. Claudia, the Sam Howell trade from yesterday featured some very interesting wording from one NFL insider about what he is going to Seattle to do.
Yeah. Backup question mark. So Commanders sending Sam Howell to the Seahawks. This is in a pick swap. So Seahawks get Howell a 4th and a 6th. Commanders get a 3rd and a 5th. I want to know how fair you guys think this is. But as you said, Adam Schefter said, Commanders sending last year's starter Sam Howell to the Seahawks in a pick swap per sources. And then as news came out, the question is, of course, is he competing for the starting job, or is he just heading in as a backup? Apparently, they've liked him for a while. Now, Drew Lock to the Giants, so the backup role is there. Do you guys think there is a reality where he takes over Geno Smith QB1 role, Gojo?
I feel like this is like in Avengers Endgame when they're fighting Thanos and you have Tony Stark looking at Doctor Strange and he asks him how many times we win, and he just holds up the one shaky finger. Like, that seems to me the number of chances and number of times that Sam Howell comes in and usurps Geno Smith. Now, Dad, it's not impossible. Sam Howell was the starter most all year last year for the Washington Commanders, and it was sort of a mixed bag because there was so much volume. I think he led the NFL in passing attempts or was damn close, and in the midst of that, you had a player that could simultaneously make really entertaining and interesting throws in that Eric Bieniemy offense, but also operated like he was still playing in the ACC, would pinball off people, tried to put his body on the line a little bit too much, and certainly took way too many sacks behind that offensive line, some of which were a problem for him. And so for Seattle and for Mike Macdonald, low risk, high upside thing. You're getting him in the last year of his rookie deal, so you've got some control. He's still cost effective, and he's got a little bit of pedigree there as far as a young quarterback in that room with Geno Smith, who's certainly closer, I think, to the end of his time being their starting quarterback. But how do you read this one?
Well, yeah, Geno's 33, Howell was 23, so you got a decade difference in there. I read this is Geno's job still. I mean, the one thing Geno doesn't do is he doesn't really turn the ball over. In his 2 years as a starter in Seattle, 50 touchdowns and 20 interceptions. We saw Howell last year go 21 and 21, not the split that you want. You mentioned the sacks. He was sacked the most of any quarterback, 65 times, even more than Bryce Young, who got the snot beat out of him as well, 62. But as you talked about, a lot of those are on the quarterback. They hang on to the ball too long. They think they can do too much. Next thing you know, it's a 12-yard loss, and they're way behind the chain. So, I don't think Sam Howell's beating out Geno Smith, because the one thing you want is if you don't have a great quarterback, and they don't, they don't have a great quarterback, you want an efficient quarterback. One that's not going, as I said, to turn the ball over. And, a couple of years ago, Geno completed almost 70% of his passes. This past year was 65% of his passes for, and as I mentioned, the touchdowns, 20-9. So I think he's more efficient, and that's what you're going to need. Sam Howell isn't coming in and taking over the league with his play. So I think you need efficiency now and nothing that turns the ball over with the type of team you have. So I think Geno Smith is easily locked in as a starter here.
I think especially I really think Geno Smith lends himself well to the offense they're about to run in Seattle. Ryan Grubb, remember, left Washington to go to Alabama and then left Alabama to go join Mike Macdonald as the OC, getting back to the Pacific Northwest, but on the NFL side. And for anyone who's watched Washington football this last year or is familiar with the Kalen DeBoer experience at all, what you saw Michael Penix Jr. doing, I think all can work really well with Geno Smith, and especially with the wide receiver core that they've still got there. Re-signed Tyler Lockett and made sure that he's sticking around there. You've obviously got DK Metcalf. You drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba. And so all those parts together in an offense last year at Washington, where we saw 3 NFL wide receivers used in a bunch of really creative ways in this offense, with a quarterback who could stand in there and fire that freaking thing. That all sounds a lot like Geno Smith to me, and a little bit different than what Sam Howell's been asked to do. So there's going to be a learning curve there. So
I agree. I agree. Yeah. And that's what you talked about with all those receivers in Chicago. Get more receivers.
Get more receivers has been the charge. Everyone's had a very specific task this offseason. Even teams like the Jets, I think, have gone out and accomplished a fair amount. They've bolstered a little bit of their offensive line. They've been working on themselves. But coming up next, boy, oh boy, we keep having to address the one distraction in the room with this football team that wants to weed out the distractions in the room on this football team. Next on Gojo and Golic.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. Earlier this week, we got news that Aaron Rodgers, yes, the Jets quarterback, may be on a ballot as vice president for RFK Jr. Then CNN reported on Wednesday that Rodgers shared beliefs that Sandy Hook, an awful shooting that happened in Newton, Connecticut, wasn't real. Now, according to the report, he told a journalist, Pamela Brown with CNN, and another person that this happened. So 2 reports coming out saying this. And of course, Aaron Rodgers had to have a comment, and this was it. As I'm on the record saying in the past, what happened in Sandy Hook was an absolute tragedy. I am not and have never been of the opinion that the events did not take place. Again, I hope that we learn from this and other tragedies to identify the signs that will allow us to prevent unnecessary loss of life. My thoughts and prayers continue to remain with the families affected along with the entire Sandy Hook community. Gojo. It's an apology. Is it the one that you were hoping to hear?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is, the bare minimum bar that I really wanted to see cleared on this because I don't know. It's probably a sad indictment of the situation that was so much of the rest of what Aaron Rodgers has talked about that this didn't seem out of the realm of possibility, which is scary considering the level of conspiracy we've seen him espouse on other issues. And so we talked about it relative to the president, vice presidential ticket potential that, oh, hey, if he really didn't want to be a distraction to the New York Jets, he needed to come out and squash that right away. But Dad, this is so far beyond that. It has nothing to do with the Jets or a distraction or anything. This is like fundamental human decency that Aaron Rodgers had to come out and attest to here because there are terrible things to be linked to. And then there's this to be linked to in terms of the Sandy Hook truth or BS that's gone on far too long that's made the lives of the people who went through the worst tragedy you can imagine for a family a living hell throughout this. And so, yes, Aaron Rodgers coming out and thankfully, mercifully distancing himself publicly from this is at least the bare minimum that I expected in this situation to not be associated with some of the worst people alive.
So, that's one thing I've never wanted to do in couple of decades I've been doing this. You and I have never really done it, is get into the politics unless they really invade sports. And the one side of this does. We've never had a player possibly being on a presidential ticket, which we'll get to. But the other side of this is one of those, and I hate talking, there's about the vaccine, viruses, blah, blah, blah. You can read the whole article about podcasts and people and their conspiracy theories. I'm with you, Mike. I separate all that. If you don't believe Sandy Hook happened, I can't tell you how that ticks me off and aggravates me. It really makes me unbelievably mad to think that there are people going, and I want to be really careful with what I say about those people. But man, I got absolutely nothing for you, and I would not want to be face to face with you either if you actually think that. To think of that tragedy that went on, and to think that people would actually discount that just absolutely ticks me off to no end. So yes, to what you said, he cleared the least bar minimum here, right? Of saying no, that I understand that it was a tragedy. Then there's the side of the presidential ticket and all that we'll get to. But yes, I am happy he did that because that would have been a real stunner to me. I hadn't heard that until it all came back up because, like I said, I don't really jump into the politics of a lot of things. But that was the bar to clear there, and he did clear that bar.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone that's not aware, background, like we spent most of our lives in Connecticut. And listen, that familiarity and that proximity doesn't make it any different. You could live all across the country in California, and watching a group of children slaughtered at their school would resonate and should resonate with anybody. But we know this is a big, wide country that has a lot of this going on, and people can only react to and respond to so much. But this was essentially in towns that were very near us, and is always going to be just kind of a unique stressor when stuff like this comes up, because we just saw it with the whole Alex Jones trial and that psycho and what went on with him and this. So this was the one where it felt like, man, we were really ready to veer over a cliff with this. And most people would say we probably already have. Like Aaron Rodgers in the position that he is now in, and basically just, I mean, taking every weird conspiracy you've ever heard on a YouTube channel or comment section and decided to give it media training and put it out in the public like this, it is certainly created an interesting air around this quarterback where now I feel like, especially in the last year where he spent so much time injured, Dad, and all we knew of Aaron Rodgers and the only content we got of Aaron Rodgers was Tuesdays with Pat McAfee, usually talking about anything but his football team.
Right.
And if he was talking about his football team, it was the things they needed to change. It was the Zach Wilson stuff. It was controversy because the team was doing bad. And so now it's created this really interesting air around this person where for so long, Aaron Rodgers was this beloved figure because he was so good at this thing that we loved watching him do. And he was charismatic enough. We'd see him on with the Levitard guys. He was very well liked. The Q rating was very high. And now that has changed drastically for a lot of people. He's a lot more polarizing. And so I go back to the football side of this, Dad, because I still don't take the presidential ticket thing seriously at all, even though that's not been addressed. I go back to the football side, and I do very much wonder, in a city like New York, what's going to happen if this guy's not good this year? Like, I truly don't know. We're in uncharted territory with a lot of these quarterbacks where you're getting guys that are playing to 40 and above in a way that just was not the norm before. He's also coming off that Achilles injury. And so I just wonder if the production dips at all, what is the reception for this person going to start to look like, especially in the city he now calls home?
You know, it's one of those things where years ago you didn't know a lot about the athlete that you followed on your team, right? Because there wasn't all the outlets now to where they could be out there as well. And now we're in an era where you can know a lot about your athletes that you follow because they'll put it out there. And some of that is good. You get, I get to know this person a little more off the field. And some of it is bad. There are some things you learn that you're like, wow, okay. It's like when you go and meet one of your favorite entertainers or someone you follow, then you get a chance to meet them, and they turn out to be not what you thought. And you're like, oh, man, I wish I never met them. You know, and I just loved their music. It didn't have to meet them. We can get that now. So you can get some of the good with the players and then some of the bad with the players as well. Really quick on this ticket. I mean, this can't happen, right? RFK Jr. has no shot at winning. So why would – because if you go on this ticket, you're done playing football, in my opinion, right? I mean, you have to go out and you have to, stump everywhere, to a losing ticket. You're not going to win. So do you have aspirations of going into politics? Do you have aspirations of being on political shows and going down that road? Well, okay, then this would be an avenue to do it. But other than that, I have no idea why he would do this because it's not going to go anywhere. And by November, during the season, he's done. They've lost an election, or they'll know they're losing the election. And then what is he doing? Because at least I don't think he can't do both.
I was talking about this with someone yesterday, and I think that the sentiment that was shared is kind of what I agree with, is Aaron Rodgers is too competitive and I think too stubborn in proving people wrong to not go back and try and play football. I mean, we remember the saga last year of him trying to convince everyone that he was going to come back from that Achilles within the body of the same season by the end of the year.
Right.
And while that ultimately got close, the Jets were so far out of contention that cooler heads prevailed. But that's the kind of person that we're dealing with, where still the athlete brain that says, when you tell me no on something, I'm going to throw that back in all of your faces. I do think that's still there for Aaron Rodgers, and it's the reason why I think I agree he's not going to be done playing football until he says he's done playing football.
100% agree. I mean, that's athletes, any athlete. Nobody wants to end your career by being hurt. And then you're right. If you, depending on what stage of life you're in, you don't want to say this is how it ended for me. I remember Charles Barkley getting hurt late in his career and say, I'm not going out this way. You want to come back and be on your field of play and call your own shot, which not a lot of people get to do. And Aaron, I agree, is one of those that says, wait a minute, people doubt whether I can come back. Hell, I'm going to come back during the season. That's what we got all last season to now. Yeah, I'm going to come back, it's better and stronger than ever. And we'll wait to see on that. But I agree with you. I think he still feels he has that to prove on the football field. And I think all the other stuff is going to – I know RFK Jr. is going to announce, I think, on March 26th, so this can all be put to bed.
Former NFLPA President Dominique Foxworth tweeted yesterday, I'm a union guy. However, I wouldn't be opposed to the NFL adding a new very specific restriction to the next CBA, saying active players can't run for any office higher than PTA president. I would be willing to endorse that on the Dominique Foxworth ticket any day.
Gojo and Golic, the college football playoff is set to expand. As you can see by this tweet, the 14-team format expected to be formalized. The tweet says in the next 24 hours, posted yesterday. So at some point today, Gojo, tell us what we have to know about this.
Yeah, so I think this is incredibly telling, the order in which things are happening right now, because Dad, what's expected to be finalized now sets the table more for the financials of the new world order that is the college football's expanded playoff than it does the actual structure and format. The idea is, hey, we're going to get a 14-team playoff, that thing you've all heard about, but probably not till 2026. And we don't exactly know what order it's going to be in right now, what the format's going to be. You've heard a bunch bannered around publicly. This stat is a lot more about the financial distribution for what's coming up in the college football playoffs new world. Every year when different teams make the college football playoff, their conferences and the schools get this nice big payout, and everyone feels good from all the TV money there. And you look at what's being proposed now and what's going to be agreed to, Dad. Like, this is a bit of a hostage situation for the conferences that aren't the Big Ten and the SEC. They're walking into the table and basically saying now, on an annual basis, the distribution is going to look like this. The Big Ten and the SEC are going to make more than $21 million per school through the college football playoff. The ACC and the Big 12 going to make about $13 million and $12 million per school annually. Notre Dame's going to get a little bit more than $12 million, and then the group of 5 schools' revenue will be just under $1.8 million. And so the Big 10 and the SEC came in and said, we're better than you guys, and we know it. And they went back and did this by percentages of teams that have made the playoff, and they said more of our teams have been in the dance than your teams. More of our teams have driven the revenue for this dance than your teams. And so we're going to have that not just assumed, we're going to codify it into law. So, Dad, to me, this is a big fire alarm for everybody that says officially what people have been talking about publicly, I think, for a while now, that there's two in everybody else. And once this goes through, I think the ripple effects for this need to start to be things that people at the bottom of certain big conferences need to worry very much about.
So just to show, again, the difference, those two conferences, Big Ten and the SEC, the $21 million they're making is over $5.5 million more than they were making now. And then you go to the group of 5, and the under 1.8 is maybe $300,000 more than they were getting before. So the money to spend. And what's the group of 5 going to do? Well, they're going to say no, and then they're left out. Right? I mean, it's not like there's a whole lot of, we always talk about when you're going to sign something or there's talking, who has leverage and bargaining, and what group of 5 doesn't have any leverage in this, right? And it's put as the 10 conferences and Notre Dame. That's how it's going to be listed. FBS, the 10 conferences and Notre Dame. But we all know what you said, Mike, is right. It's 2. It's the Big Ten and it's the SEC. But what they did put in there, they said a couple of years, remember, this deal wouldn't start till 2026. And they did say a couple of years into that, I think in 2028, they would reassess the model. And if more ACC teams or Big 12 teams or Group of 5 teams were getting into the playoffs, the 14-team field, that they would up their pay a little bit. So it was a nice way of saying, hey, this is where you are right now. Show us a little more, and maybe we'll throw you a few more crumbs.
Yeah, they're creating the illusion of potential progress, because the other fun part of this is the new way they're getting ready to structure this playoff. They're trying to carve out more space, and will, for the Big Ten and the SEC to get more teams automatically into the dance. They're going to make it structurally so that what they just described isn't possible. And the hilarious part of all this is it's not at all unexpected, given everything that we've seen go on in the sport, that these two conferences that are different than everybody else materially right now would look around and say, oh yeah, we're going to make sure you feel this financially. It's that it comes on the heels of all the stuff that we saw this week going on in Capitol Hill, where you had that name, image, and likeness thing. And what was the common refrain that we heard from everybody in there is, oh, well, if you start paying everybody, football and basketball is going to eat up all this money, and then you're going to lose all these other sports. Basically, the idea that we've always heard is it's somewhat the job of football and the revenue sports to subsidize the rest of the athletic department. We cannot have this group these groups and these teams without the moneymakers bringing this in and redistributing the wealth to the rest of the athletic department. And then the major conferences go out and basically say, yeah, it's not our job to subsidize what's going on in G5 when it comes to this championship format. They can have some of our money, but we're going to take way more of our money because this is capitalism, big dog. So again, the rampant... I mean, it is. It's rampantly hypocritical at the top of the sport for some of these same leaders to say, hey, if you mess with this current formula by giving all these kids money, you're going to mess up a lot for these other athletes and make their lives bad. And then at the same time, when you are in a position to be at this money-making table and say, yeah, you know what, we've already got so much. We can keep this thing even keel. We can give the group of five what appears to, at least on paper, be a better opportunity to do this and make sure that the money goes out evenly. Nah, player, some is great, more is better. Bring us that bag.
So would you make this akin to like a company where your better employees get bigger bonuses? I mean, is that kind of what we're doing here? We're saying, okay, yeah, I'll work at the same company, but those who outperform others are going to get more money. And basically the Big Ten and the SEC are saying, listen, we're better than everybody else at this company, so we're going to get more money here.
I think this is a might makes right situation where, hey, everyone in college football, and Dad, you talked about this, I think, very early in a lot of the conversations we had around the restructuring that was going on in college football. And this was pre-pandemic when we talked about this idea that, would the five power conferences work together and break away from the NCAA at that point? Because you had this inflection point around what was happening with sports in the midst of the global pandemic. And you're like, these guys can't work together very well. They're all too self-interested. They tried these handshake agreements, and then the minute something benefited them or hurt them more than the others, they cut bait and ran. That's exactly what's going on here. Is everybody is looking out for their own self-interest in this and only caring about others as much as they're incentivized to do financially. That's been the point in all of this, is what you just described as a normal structure that's supposed to apply to everybody but the players in this process, according to the people that make a lot of these decisions. And so the thing that's interesting to me spinning this forward is, for so long, the haves have all been inside the Big Ten and the SEC. And I don't know how long that conference stability is going to last, because as we see, this changes every year. The interesting part becomes, if you're Rutgers, if you're Maryland, if you're Vanderbilt or any of the teams at the bottom of the SEC who have been chanting SEC in the three letters, watching your conference do real great, you got all this conference pride, you're next. You don't think that at some point Ohio State and Michigan and Alabama and Georgia and all these teams up top are going to look down within their own conference ecosystem at some of the other teams and go, well, you're not like us. I mean, hell, Florida State, there's been conversation about this because they can't get out of that grant of rights of them doing it in the ACC.
Yep. It's exactly right. What you brought up that Florida State was trying to do in the ACC, saying basically we're better than a lot of you, so the money should be distributed differently. And then there's certainly the side of it that people will expect to hear from us because we both are domers. Is this going to make Notre Dame finally join a conference? You know, you look at the breakdown of the 12 team that they're going to go with for the next couple of years. It's 5 automatic, it's 7 at large. So Notre Dame has no reason to join a conference. But now, if you go to 14, and there's talk in this 14 that there would only be 3 at large spots. So I think that would make maybe Notre Dame fans a little more like, maybe we need to get in to a conference because that's only 3 spots there. But the caveat in that deal would be if Notre Dame is 14 or higher in the rankings, they have an automatic slot. Mike, we were talking about it, and I agree with you. I think that automatic slot at 14 that you get into the playoffs is something that would most likely keep Notre Dame independent.
Yeah, the idea that I think, is if Notre Dame was ranked 14th or higher, they would, in the final CFP polls, they would get essentially what amounts to an automatic bid into the dance there. And I think and it is interesting because, listen, with the 12-team format where it was 5 teams getting the automatic bid, 7 at-large teams there, I always said Notre Dame wasn't getting special treatment in that formula. It was, hey, if they were one of the teams selected in a field that was going to include a bunch of non-conference champions, you'd be good to go. They're still going to be non-conference champions that get in this field, but this would absolutely be creating a little bit of special treatment for Notre Dame. And that's showbiz, baby, because again, what's this all about? The bottom line. Who's it all about the bottom line for? Apparently everybody but the players in the eyes of decision makers. We'll see how long that holds up.
We're back here on Gojo and Golic, and the Celtics are back on another win streak, this time 4 games straight with another dub over the Suns at home. 15-point win despite Kevin Booker, Bradley Beal, and KD all being on the court. Somehow the Suns team has still not put it together, but of course, good news for Celtics fans. Brown and Tatum dropped 63 combined. Interesting, silly moment here, though. Head coach Joe Mazzulla sprinted to prevent Royce O'Neal from making a shot. This was a practice basket after a timeout. He leaped up, tried to block the shot. Interesting moment. Jason Tatum was asked about it. Here's what he had to say.
Joe being Joe. That's who Joe is. So when he did, I wasn't caught off guard. I expect him or one of the coaches to do that. You gotta love Joe for Joe.
I saw a guy going in to try to get a shot, and he hadn't made one, and I didn't want him to feel good about himself going to the bench. Gary asked me about that a month ago, and that's the bench rule. Guys don't shoot shots in front of our bench to go back to their bench to feel good about themselves. If I'm going to ask the guys to contest, the staff's got to do the same.
So did you guys did you tackle guys like in between breaks and football, or how does that work? What? This is the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
We have to this. Is this the closest thing we have to like Mike Tomlin during that Ravens punt return? Wasn't he near the sideline and almost like got in somebody's way? Didn't that happen a while back? Like, this is the most unhinged weirdo behavior I've ever seen.
Yeah. But the weirdest part of it is they're not like, oh, it was just a silly moment. He's like, oh yeah, no, that was part of the game plan. Like we did what? What? Just say no. It was a silly moment.
Well, and this is something I would need to know from a player. Right? Is this one of the, unwritten rules we see? He's trying to make it sound like it's a rule. You don't let anybody get a shot off in front of your bench in a timeout. Seems pretty specific. If there's a timeout, you don't let anybody shoot in front of your bench. He happened to be walking out there during the timeout, right basically in front of the shooter, so he jumped up trying to block it. But I didn't know that was kind of a rule. But I do like the, hey, if I'm asking my players to do it, I'm gonna do it myself.
I mean, so we see this plenty, right? Where you'll see a whistle called or something, and guys will go up and board the ball by the rim or something like that, because all these guys are like, I don't want to see him get rhythm from perimeter, use that extra opportunity to maybe get back hot if there's someone that's going through a shooting cold streak. I understand the psychological warfare of all that,
right?
But watching a head coach in the National Basketball Association for the best team right now, record-wise in the league, even if I think the Denver Nuggets are actually the best team in basketball, Boston record-wise and what they're doing in the East is a dominant force of nature's fury, and Joe Mazzulla is the man at the helm. And that man went triple extension to go up and try and block an active NBA player's shot in the middle of a timeout. That is lunatic behavior, and I cannot sit up here and endure. Dad, imagine watching. Would that fire you up as a player, Dad, as someone who played professional sports for 9 years, if all of a sudden you had a situation going on and Buddy Ryan had come over there and try and do the cash equivalent of the swipe the ball out of an opposing quarterback's hands that you guys have to go play against? How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody would be upset at it in the emotion of the moment. I'm not going to lie. I haven't seen that before, but Joe made it sound like this was a team rule that you don't let happen. So if in fact it is, then I would not be surprised that the players for Boston weren't surprised. But if I'm an opponent, I would certainly be surprised, yes, if I'm getting off one of those shots that we've seen a million times, a coach going up to block it. Yeah, that would get a second stare from me. Yeah, what the hell are you doing? And oh, by the way, you're not going to block my shot. You're too short.
Gojo's freaking out right now. I just want to say the video reminds me of a Mike McDaniel move. That's something but he's known as a silly out there coach. Mazzulla's not, which is why this is weird to me. But Gojo, you're stressing right now.
Joe Mazzulla stared into the soul of that camera like it was trying to rob his mother and was like, yeah, I do this. This is a team rule. And this, I'm like, dude, you don't play for the team.
Right,
you coach the team. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff that the players do that are rules on this team that Joe Mazzulla, because he's a coach who coaches basketball and doesn't play it, doesn't do. This is such I
Royce O'Neal.
Begin to describe how weird this is.
Is Royce O'Neal really going to go off and ruin this game for you?
Yeah, it does seem somewhat ridiculous.
I can't believe that, like, Royce O'Neal didn't do more in response to this too. Like, an opposing coach comes
what are you going to...
we see this all the time in our sport in football, where what's the number one rule when you're got players near the sideline is coaches don't touch the merchandise. Like, we hear that all the time.
Right.
If you're a coach and there's a player over by the sideline, the last thing on earth you do is put hands on one of the players. That's how fights start. I'm amazed that there wasn't a fight that got started off this, because while he didn't touch him up, it wasn't a physical confrontation. It was close enough and weird enough and jarring enough. And maybe I just don't know ball like that when it comes to basketball. And I've been missing other. Maybe Greg Popovich has been going up to contest threes at timeouts for the last 2 decades, and I just missed it on NBA TV along with the weird halftime shows.
Not you.
Well, so I guess that's what I'm wondering too. Is it just this didn't surprise anybody in the basketball world? I don't know. You know what? I'm anxious to hear today, just because I played sports doesn't mean I know everything going on in the sport. I don't know about this. The only time I remember where players and coaches had the same rule was in training camp with Buddy Ryan, when he basically said, if you guys are going to fight, go ahead and fight. He encouraged fighting, but he also told the coaches, hey, coaches, if you jump in there and start jawing or jump in to break something up, then get ready to fight as well, because you're going to have to fight, which seemed really bizarre, at the time of, oh, by the way, that happened. That happened where coaches got involved and players and coaches were squaring off. I mean, it was a wild situation, but it became the norm for us as much as we were with Buddy saying, okay, coach, you want to jump in here, then, you're about to get your ass whooped too, in this whole thing. But so that's the only other time I was like, coach and player, yeah, you guys do the same thing. It looked odd, but Mike, that's the thing that was most odd to me, is it didn't seem odd to them.
You know what? And maybe I'm going to come full circle on this and be like, man, Joe Mazzulla, big culture setter. Like, if I'm going to preach it, best believe I'm going to practice it right now. And you know what? Maybe this is like his bizarro version of when we'd see Steve Kerr for all those years in Golden State. He'd turn over the timeouts to his Warriors veterans, and they'd go over there and they'd coach guys up in there as a way to keep them engaged during a long, successful season. Maybe Joe Mazzulla's like, man, we've been boat racing the Eastern Conference for such a long time right now. The guys might be getting lax here. I got to go and give them a little shot of energy off the bench right now, Claudia.
You know what I think this is? They're hearing everybody say that they're too soft. And so now Mazzulla is trying to be the guy who's, I'm rough and tough. Yeah. Like, relax. Yeah. I still think this is absolutely ridiculous. But that's the only thing that comes to mind. If they're hearing it, and I was the one who said it too. We talk about Tatum's crunch time numbers and how bad they are. It's clear they're the best team in NBA, but when it comes down the stretch, they have faltered. And people are saying that's because they're soft. Yep. I said maybe it's a Mazzulla thing. Maybe he's not coaching them the right way. So maybe he's listening to our show, guys. And he's like, you know what I'm going to go do? Block a shot from Royce O'Neal. That really means nothing. But to us, it does. That's my theory.
I'm surprised, because it is, for us watching out of the ordinary, that nothing more was made of it, or just something that I might be missing right now. And maybe that was a Joe Mazzulla instantaneous thing of, I'm going to try and block the shot. Then you're going to get asked about it and saying how it's a rule. And to Claudia's point, showing your toughness. To me, it ends up being much ado about nothing, but it was an odd look because we don't see that all the time. So it's a fun little talking point to wonder. Again, he didn't block the shot at all, but by God, I would have rather him got down in a defensive stance, like I'm defending this thing, because he ain't going to have hops to block that shot. This is kind of an odd thing that throughout the day, I'm going to look forward to hear what players have to say about something like this.
Ball is so firmly ingrained in Joe Mazzulla's DNA that he saw a defender nearest to him and couldn't help but contest the shot. You know what it is with Joe? It's the eyes. It's the eyes and the fact that I know he's watching the town way more than a human adult should watch the town in any given week. And when you combine those two factors like a fusion dance, you end up getting this, one of the funniest moments in the NBA season so far for a team that's only real measure of success now is, can you beat Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets? Because if you contest, I'm guaranteed you contest Jokic's three right in that spot, that sucker's going in. That's the difference between the Nuggets and everyone else right now.
Golic, where all week we've been talking about players on new teams, but there's also a lot of head coaches who will be making their debuts this season. So let's talk about a few of them. Of course, a lot of people saying Jim Harbaugh heading into the best quarterback situation, but guys, Raheem Morris is the only coach on this board whose squad is a favorite to win their division. Curious, maybe he stands out to you, or any of these other guys who really have had a lot of movement so far in free agency, Gojo?
Yeah, Dad, it's an interesting list to start to consider now because while certain teams that have had to deal with some tampering allegations might dispute this, we feel like we're pretty deep in the process because of the legal tampering period and all the stuff that we know goes on behind closed doors. And so kind of looking up and taking stock of everyone, Dad, I'm with Claudia. Obviously, the answer is Atlanta as far as teams that have improved their fortune the most, just because what they did involved the premier quarterback of free agency in Kirk Cousins, in addition to all the things that we already knew were on that roster. Is there anyone else, though, that's jumped out to you in the early going here that might have done enough to improve their team's chances? Maybe not to win their division, but at the very least put a good foot forward going into year one.
So I'm going to do it this way. 8 new head coaches out there. And what was the one, when all these jobs were available, what was the job we said was the most appealing? Is you looked at quarterback. It was the Chargers because you had Justin Herbert, right? And if Jim Harbaugh was going to be part of this, and he was probably going to be that guy, that seemed like the marriage made in heaven to finally take this team to where everybody thought it had the talent to go, but never got there. I'm going to ask a question that I think is legitimate. You look at the teams with the new coaches, you look at the off seasons they had. We always talk about winning and losing an off season. Of these 8 teams, there were only 3 that had a worse record than the Chargers last year, and 2 of them only by 1 game. The Chargers were 5-12. Washington had 4 wins. Patriots had 4 wins, and then you had Carolina with 2 wins. Right now, and maybe it might be tough to go past Carolina, of the 8 teams with new head coaches, could the Chargers possibly have the worst record at the end of this season than all of them? Because they have gotten rid of their firepower on offense. They've done nothing at this point to help the defensive side of the ball. They were too busy trying to restructure and or get rid of the cap hell they were in with 4 players outside of the quarterback over $30 million. Could they possibly have the worst record of all 8 new head coaching teams?
The only reason I just, like, my immediate knee-jerk reaction is to say no, it's just it's solely off Jim Harbaugh's reputation, right?
Yeah.
It's looking at this coach who has every stop along the way been someone who, outside of Stanford, where it took a couple of years to get going, has basically put the paddles to everybody's chest and gotten them back online pretty expeditiously because he knows what he wants, because he has such a well-earned reputation of what he does along the lines of scrimmage. And so, Dad, that's probably the only reason I'd say that, is because for everyone else and a lot of these coaches, I shouldn't say everyone else, but for a lot of these coaches, when we look at ones like Raheem Morris, who's getting his second opportunity to be a head coach, but first in a while. Gerard Mayo, new at this. Antonio Pierce, a little bit of experience, but largely new. Brian Callahan, Mike McDonald, Dave Canales, like all guys that we don't know what they look like in this chair. We know what Jim looks like in this chair, and so I think out of respect for him as a known commodity, I would say no on that, with little roster reason why I can say that, other than, hey, you still have the quarterback. They're going to, I believe now, take offensive line near the top of the draft, because everything they've been showing us. Now, you could say, hey, they need youth at wide receiver. Quentin Johnston, their first-round pick from the other year, and I believe one other player whose name's escaping me right now, really the only 2 receivers of note left on their roster. So you could make an argument that this is clearing the way for them to bring youth in there, but I do think based on the way that Jim Harbaugh and company have come in and stated their claim for this team, Greg Roman, their offensive coordinator, they're going to load up on beef and try and hurt people that way while they build this house the only way they know how to.
Yeah, Joshua Palmer's the guy that you were thinking of. He's the receiver who's there. He has 38 receptions. Quentin Johnson had 38 receptions. Keenan Allen led the way with 108. Austin Eckler had 51. Gerald Everett had 51. Those are all gone, along with Mike Williams. It's tough for me to sit there and say the worst record, Mike, but I think that'd be below the Mendoza line there. I think of the 8, they'll be in the bottom 4. And maybe lower than that. It's tough for me with Carolina to see how far they're going to come. But a lot of teams got better. And again, you don't win in the offseason. I get it. But that's how you start to try and win, by making moves in the offseason. And Claudia, I just think they had to cut a little bit too much bait to get things squared away to start square one again with Harbaugh, where this isn't going to be a very, very tough year for them.
I think Gojo speaks correctly on the coaching part. I'm curious, Senior, then, does this mean you're optimistic about the Patriots? Because if we're talking odds, odds makers know a lot, but they don't know everything. Right now, of this list, the Patriots have the longest odds to win their division. Chargers are right there at plus 250 behind the Chiefs. So I get what you're saying. They lost a lot of firepower on offense, but the Patriots really didn't have much to begin with. Yeah, they brought some guys back, but does this mean you're optimistic if you think the Patriots maybe aren't at the bottom of the barrel of this list?
No. Maybe I should have explained this. Who is going to be the worst of the worst? That's more where I'm going along the lines. Outside of Atlanta, and we get surprised every year. How many years we've gone now where 4 teams that didn't make the playoffs end up making the playoffs? Do we think any of these teams are going to be able to make the playoffs? We talk about Atlanta has the possibility of winning the division. I completely agree. But no, I'm talking about as Claudia, you're trying to get better. I'm not talking about these teams are all of a sudden really good teams, though Atlanta was the closest to winning a division. I'm just wondering how bad they will be this year as all these first-time head coaches have to deal with all the changes that they made. Some of their teams had the position to make some moves and try and get better, but like Washington has gathered a ton of pieces. But we have no idea, what the sum of those parts are going to look like. It looks like they picked up players they need, but how does it happen when we all get together? But for the Chargers, their defense was bad. The offense underachieved. You lost all your offense. The defense hasn't gotten any better. I just think of all the teams trying to improve, they might had to hit kind of a tripping point first before they could start again. Do I think they'll be the worst? I think they could have a shot. If I were to say, I would say maybe the third worst record out of these 8 teams. But I think they'll be below the middle of the pack there.
I don't think I agree. I really don't on this one. I just think, especially like the clearly defined bads, like the most interesting team to me of that group, because I think the Patriots are going to have to take their lumps right now in the early going, and I think they know that. Like they're dealing with more than most, coming off dealing with the last rattles of a dynasty that died slowly on the vine over the last few seasons, and having to reimagine kind of what goes on with this whole organization. The Washington Commanders are really interesting. Like I generally don't know what to make of what's going to go on here. Dan Quinn's model for team building is basically sign a bunch of players that you kind of already knew before. It's sort of the Doc Rivers thing, minus one of them being related to you. So I maybe it could work, but they're clearly one of the teams also that's taking a quarterback sitting there at 2 overall. And so that could change quickly, but all of a sudden I don't know how, all right, the weapons around necessarily help out that young player. Right. So I look at them and like DK Sportsbook right now, Panthers, as far as Super Bowl odds overall, so just listing everybody, Panthers have the worst odds, Patriots have the second worst odds, Titans are down there as well. Commanders are in the bottom 8 right there. They're at plus 10,000 to get there. So thought of at least a little bit more highly. But Dad, in the NFC East, where, the Cowboys haven't done much to get better, but they've still won 12 games the last 3 years. They're going to beat you up in the regular season. Obviously, most people expect the Eagles' talent to bounce back with some of the new guys they've got there on offense and defense. And so I don't know how much wiggle room there is there amongst the fighting in the basement between the Giants and the Washington Commanders.
I'm basically, I would put New England and Carolina below the Chargers, and after that, I think it's up in the air of who's next as far as worse. Now, you bring up the point of Washington's going to have a new quarterback, and that's going to certainly add into what they're going to do this year. But I could see the other teams having at least as good a year win-wise. I'm talking about win-wise. Than the Chargers. You mentioned the Super Bowl odds. Where are the Chargers in that? You want to talk about something I wouldn't bet on?
So I want to ask you this, Dad, because one of the other teams that's going to get brought up on this, Antonio Pierce, who it's funny because he had the interim tag last year and we're used to him in that role, but this is going to be his first year as the head coach and actual title. You think they're going to finish ahead of the Chargers in the AFC West is what it sounds like.
I think they are. You have a defense now that you finally have a running mate with Max Crosby. You have a defense that, if nothing else, can try and keep your scores closer and keep you in more games. The Chargers' defense was bad, and they've done nothing yet at this point to fix that. And the Raiders have tried to help their defense. We'll see what goes on at the quarterback position. Obviously, you don't have Josh Jacobs either, but you do have Devontae Adams.
That's a pretty big we'll see, though. That's a pretty big we'll see, saying Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew are going to usher us over the Chargers in the division here.
I have no problem saying right now the Raiders will finish ahead of the Chargers. You want to take me up on that? That's fine. Pick out what you want to lose, and then we'll have that bet.
I'll be the bookie here. You guys, how much you want to put on this?
Well, I mean, we could figure out the wager. Jason Fitz is somewhere smiling ear to ear, by the way, our buddy, hearing my dad talk so glowingly about his team right now.
You do know Vegas had a better record than the Chargers this past year, don't you? By 3 games.
But you're not worried
about... So you think that the Chargers have done enough and the Raiders have not done enough to where the Raiders still won't be better record-wise than the Chargers? You think the Chargers have done enough to overtake the 3 more wins that the Raiders had last year?
I think based on coaching alone, yeah, you're getting a major stock up. Jim Harbaugh was the belle of the ball this offseason. Jim Harbaugh is someone that's been successful at this level very short order in San Francisco in his last trip out here. So I do think him alone is worth a fair amount here in the way they reorg this building. They're not done yet. We'll wait and see what they do between the draft, between just the general way they're structuring. Remember, it's going to be an entirely different defense. Brandon Staley coming over from that group of Vic Fangio disciples built to stop one very specific style of offense that couldn't stop the run here. You're getting Jesse Minter in a defense that structurally is built a lot more like what we had in Baltimore, that structurally is, I think, one of the most compelling and could mask some of the roster flaws that this team's had up front. But I'd shudder to think they're not going to address the middle of that defensive line somewhere, either in the rest of free agency or coming up in the draft here. So I'm just saying, with what I know is the coach that's coming in and the quarterback that they've got there, I feel a lot better over a longer sample size about that team at this point than maybe I do. It's not by a wide margin at this point, because like you said, I do like some of the stuff the Raiders have done. They've still got Devontae Adams there on that offense that's going to look a little bit different. I'm just saying both sides have weathered a lot of change, and one side has a nuclear option at quarterback, and the other side's trying to figure it out right now.
All right, Claudia, he's trying to make his case. You're listening right now. Whatever the bet's going to be, right now I will stamp it that the Raiders will have a better record than the Chargers. I will put it in pen right now if you would like. So, Mike, you go ahead and pick out, like I said, what you think you could win or you don't want or you want to lose, because you're going to lose this bet. I think both sides are. You think San Diego? I think they go. I lost San Diego. I think both these teams probably go O-line, right, in their first round of the draft. I do, especially because
I saw a
the
mock
Raiders
yesterday that had the Raiders. I saw a mock yesterday that had both the Raiders taking Talisi Fuaga out of Oregon State, which. You want to talk about somebody that should be a Raider. That dude should be a Raider. Certified people mover, nasty streak. I think he was the one at the combine that was showing off his stomach tattoo. Just reeks of Raider. Watching that guy clang and bang against Christian Wilkins in practice would be an absolute dream for Raiders fans going to preseason football action or going to training camp. So, I do think there's a chance that both of them go offensive line. Pretty early on here. The Raiders are one that I don't know if they're out of the quarterback market yet, though, Dad. Based on what I think is going to happen in this draft. Like, looking at the draft, we've had so much conversation about quarterbacks going 1, 2, 3. Wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden J.J. McCarthy and Jaden Daniels are guys that are more available as we get closer to 10 in the teens than people are giving it credit for now. I'm just not as sold still. And I've maintained this the entire time.
I agree.
That Jaden Daniels is a guy that you take in the top 3. And so I do think if it gets down in that range, where we've talked about that sort of sweet spot with Denver and Minnesota and the Las Vegas Raiders right there at 10, 11, 12 or 11, 12, 13, whatever the order is there. Once you get down there, all bets are kind of off if you've got those two guys in Jaden Daniels and J.J. McCarthy, specifically Claudia, sitting there.
Yeah, and I will say the odds are favoring Daniels a bit more now. It was around even money between him and May to go number 2 overall. Now Daniels the minus 175 favorite. So that money has come in, and of course these market really only move based off of what people are hearing. So maybe more rumors are coming in that Daniels does go number 2. which then means the Patriots said they would move back if they don't get him. So that makes me feel a little queasy. But yes, to talk about where Daniels is expected to go, he is favored to go number 2.
I think 2 other interesting teams to consider as we're having this conversation that's been very AFC West based. Well, we talked a little bit earlier in the show because of the Sam Howell trade about Mike McDonald, what's going on with the Seahawks, but the Titans that we brought up the other day, and I do think the Panthers become really interesting this year. Obviously, Dave Canales, the first-time head coach. We know Bryce Young had the season from hell last year, and addressing wide receiver meaningfully, you got Deontay Johnson in there, which is definitely an added boost. And then you went out in the offensive line and brought in a couple of guys. Robert Hunt was the big signing of the offseason in terms of the offensive guards, but him, Damian Lewis from Seattle, like, Dad, I look at the Panthers, and obviously the big worry is still you've got a meddlesome owner that at any given time could decide to light everything on fire and make this really difficult again. But so far of what they could do, knowing what we thought they needed to do in helping protect your small quarterback and getting him some people to throw to, they've at least gone out and addressed it. Like the Dallas Cowboys fans are still sitting out here going, what the hell are we doing this entire offseason? Right. At the very least, if you're a Panthers fan, you're going, all right, this makes logical sense. I don't know how much it nets them yet, but again, the only metric for success this season for Dave Canales is, do you get Bryce Young back online? Do you get him to look like any semblance of the number 1 overall pick? And these moves at least reflect that is their goal. That's what they're operating with in mind.
I agree. Getting help right up the gut at the guard position, bringing in the wide receiver as well, Deontay Johnson, to give them more weapons, because they were relying on a 32-year-old Adam Thielen last year. So I do like the moves they made. And we'll see. If the arrow, as we talk about, the offseason, you win or lose the offseason, so you say arrow up, but then you have to see practical application on the field, whether you're grabbing a lot of players or not, because one of the teams I'm really interested, Mike, is the Tennessee Titans. I know Houston has kind of shook everybody up by doing what we thought they may do in a couple of years, but they did it in year 1. So I still think while that team should be nothing but the arrow up and they can only get better, I'll be interested as Tennessee has moved on from their quarterback, moves on from their great running back. We know they always had a tough Mike Vrabel defense. Now, obviously, he's not there anymore. It's Brian Callahan running the show. This team interests me. You help your O-line, getting Cushenberry in there. Tony Pollard, we'll see. I think he'll be part of a 2-headed monster again at the running back position. You help a bit on the defensive side. That's another team I think we just don't talk about because I think let's wait and see what they do. I'm interested to see what kind of the moves they made and how they actually come to fruition on the field.
Yeah, it's just interesting trying to see and identify, like, what do we think everyone's plan is there? Like with Tennessee, bringing Bill Callahan over makes me think, hey, maybe we can refocus this around protecting our quarterback. There's definitely movement on that part there, but overall, kind of hard to identify what they're going to be because I don't think we yet know what Will Levis is going to be as a quarterback. But like for the others that we mentioned here, Raheem Morris in Atlanta, go get Kirk Cousins. That was the goal, and now you become, hopefully, what everyone always kind of wanted to see, the version of him. We got some of it last year. Kevin O'Connell's a disciple from the McVay tree, but we get to see another version of this with an offense that we think fully formed around him is pretty interesting. We mentioned already Mike McDonald and what he's going to build out there. Jim Harbaugh, very clear identity, very clear goals. Dave Canales, very clear identity, very clear goals in terms of protecting and getting weapons for the quarterback. Antonio Pierce, hey, we want to hit Patrick Mahomes. We want to Jordan rules Patrick Mahomes, and so let's go out and get another glass eater that's going to come here and beat the hell out of him. It's fun to see that there are at least some people executing with a clear understanding of what they needed in mind and going out and backing up the words with action.
I stopped listening to what you said because, Claudia, I wanted to ask you, what I never heard out of Mike's mouth was accepting my bet. I didn't hear that.
I like this.
So did you hear that anywhere?
But you haven't agreed to terms. You're leaning on me to come up with the interesting bet on here. Offer something up, old man, and I'll agree to it.
All right. I'll think of something that I want to win because I will win this bet.
I'll brainstorm.
I'll tell you what I want. I want your hair. I want your luscious head of hair.
You can't.
How are you going to get that? What are you going to do?
Make you shave it if you lose.
It'll just grow back and tick you off even more. I'll look like you for a day. And then in 2 days, I'll grow back this luscious lettuce that I have.
Golic with a little news that got better, question mark. It was bad news in the Bronx. It's a little bit better because Gerrit Cole does not need Tommy John. That was the fear. He's still going to be out for 1 to 2 months. He went to go see famed Dr. Neil Alatrosh, and they did not find the tear. So that's the good news. But the bad news is he won't be there, which really hurts this rotation. Yet they're still the favorite in the AL East. And with that, we bring in Steve Buchanan, our very own from DK, to talk about this. Of course, awful news to be without him for 1 to 2 months. What's your thoughts on this whole situation? And also, great to see ya.
It's good to see you. Welcome to the team, first and foremost. We haven't talked together since you've joined, but yeah, let's talk about Gerrit Cole here a little bit. To me, the news good in the sense that, yeah, he's going to need Tommy John surgery. Yeah, but like, we're kind of, feels like we're delaying the inevitable at this point here. That's kind of my fear here, is that we're just kind of waiting to see what ends up happening here. And if Cole's going to end up having to get this surgery anyways to begin with. Like, this kind of feels like they're just kind of kicking the can down the road, and we're just kind of waiting to see when this is going to happen inevitably anyway. So it is good news now, but like, are they really going to end up going full throttle with him and having him go like the starts during the year or whatnot?
I guess at this point, yeah, and boy, what a horse he's been, right? He hasn't missed a game for a non-COVID ailment since going on injury reserve in the injured list in 2016. At least 30 starts since 2017. He has been a horse. And I guess, we were talking just a little bit before we got on air, Steve, I about the rehab before surgery, where you rehab, you realize you still need the surgery, then you wasted a month or two. But I guess either way, it doesn't matter here. Why not try and see if you can get something out of him this year? Because once you have that surgery, whether you had it now or a month from now, you're going to be out the year anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So I guess why not try to see what you can get out of him this year if you can, and if it can heal up, with non-invasive rehab.
No, without a doubt, too. And the thing is, too, is like this rotation has so many question marks to begin with already, right? Like, sure, you brought in Marcus Stroman. That's nice there. But after that, it's like there's nobody you can really rely upon. You got Carlos Rodon, who's been fine at times, but he has a long history of injuries. You got Clark Schmidt. You got Nestor Cortez, who missed a huge chunk last year. There's just not a guy that's going to be able to step up and be that number one if Cole goes down. And then you look at the free agent market. They're not going to bring in Blake Snell. They've been pretty adamant about that. Jordan Montgomery is great, don't get me wrong, but he's almost like one of those guys that he's more attractive right now just because of the lack of guys that are out there. So it's like you want to try to get Cole out there and be that stopper, because quite frankly, I have a lot of concern with this Yankees lineup. I get that they brought in Juan Soto, but this is not going to be a lineup that's going to go out there and crush day in and day out when, quite frankly, other than Soto, which was the only real difference they made, this team had one of the lowest batting averages in the league last year. They only hit better than the Oakland Athletics. The joke of the entire league, they only had a better batting average than the Oakland Athletics last year. That's not something you want to have a claim to fame. You're not hanging that stat from the rafters, that's for sure. So there's a lot to be concerned about when it comes to this Yankees club. Losing that guy, some injuries to Aaron Judge. We're not even at opening day yet, boys.
Steve, I'm so glad you're saying this because I bet the under on the Yankees last season. Everybody said I was crazy. I said, go look at the splits when Aaron Judge is in the lineup and when he's out of it. It was like you are falling off of a cliff. And so I said, Aaron Judge, after a historic season, he's going to get hurt if he misses a few games. I predicted that. I didn't actually know what happened. But I said, if he gets hurt, he's out of the lineup. What's going to happen? And that's exactly what happened. Now you're already getting injuries to the rotation, way too top heavy in the lineup. I look at this Orioles squad who just had an amazing season, the best in the AL, yet they're still second behind them, plus 190, so they're inching up. But talk about a young core with a really high ceiling. Maybe I'm just a Yankees hater, but I don't want to give this love that everybody wants to give to the Yankees just because they got Soto and just because they have Cole and just because they are the New York Yankees.
I mean, let's be fair. If any team adds Juan Soto, that is a massive addition to any lineup, to any club. So let's not take that away. But you're right. Like when you look at this Yankees team, like I just mentioned, they had the second lowest batting average in the league. They only scored more runs last year than only 5 different clubs. That's a problem. If you're the New York Yankees, you shouldn't be scoring only more runs than only 5 other teams. But you're right. I love everything to do with this Orioles team. They went out, they got a bona fide ace in Corbin Burns. So now there's your guy there. And then you look at the guys that they lost per se. No one's going to miss them. Kyle Gibson, Aaron Hicks, Adam Frazier. See you later. No one's even going to notice that you're gone because the guys that they added, Corbin Burns, Craig Kimbrell, even though I can't stand Craig Kimbrell and his little motions and all the saves he blows. Everyone says he's an automatic Hall of Famer. For what? For blowing all these saves? I'll come on another time. We'll talk Craig Kimbrell. But I just love everything to do with this Orioles team. They are so young. They have like 5 more prospects that could potentially make this team. You add in Jackson Holiday, Adley Rutschman, Colton Cowser, Heston Kjerstad, who's had amazing springs. This team is loaded. If you can get them to win the division now, take the discount, take the price, the added price here, because the Yankees are still favored. Give me a break. They're not making it.
One of my favorite bits is always eat this, not that. So Steve Buchanan saying eat this in the Baltimore Orioles and their future in the AL East, not that in the New York Yankees and what they've got going on here. I want to go into another, all that glitters, is it still gold situation. Everyone's been so hyper-focused on the Dodgers and all the additions out there this season. I'm curious, Steve, as you look at that team, do you have any concerns with that roster and some of the things that they have or haven't addressed?
So I do, and I think this is something that really hasn't been brought up about, and I kind of go back to basketball a little bit here. When you construct these super teams that are just uber talented, but they always kind of seem to struggle, like maybe down the stretch or in the middle of the season, and it takes them, it feels like, a little bit longer to kind of rebound and get back to where they should be. That kind of feels like that's what could happen here with the Dodgers, because nobody can say that this team is not absolutely flushed with talent, with the amount of guys that they have there, for them to spend $1 billion this offseason, although they're probably using like pay it now, pay it later with PayPal with the amount of deferments that they've made. But this team is just so flushed with talent that it's like, well, how don't they win? But this is such a long season, 162 games that we have to go through. There are going to be stretches, undoubtedly, that the Dodgers are going to go through. And it's going to be like, well, who is going to bring this team out from, whatever they're going through right now? Who's going to bring this team and rise to that second level that they undoubtedly can get to, but they might need to kind of kick it into second gear? Because if you're the Dodgers, how are you not feeling like, well, we're just going to coast through the regular season here? Look at all the talent behind us that we can't just go through and plow through every other team. So that is what I do worry about. And the expectations are so incredibly high. And that's always, I feel, a bad thing for a team, because they have to perform to that level. Anything less than a World Series for the Dodgers right now is going to feel like a failure. That is a huge amount that you have to worry about.
So I'm going to say right now, the Dodgers aren't winning the World Series. The Dodgers aren't even going to win the National League pennant. Who wins it? I'm just saying, I'm just making this as a question. But who wins it? Who would go instead of them?
I love what the Diamondbacks did this offseason. That team was good already, and then they added all the pieces that they were missing. They needed a left-handed bat in that lineup. They went out there and got Jock Peterson. They needed more power. They went out and got Eugenio Suarez. They needed another reliable starter in that rotation. They went out and got Eduardo Rodriguez. That feels like a complete team, and that team would be talked about more if it not for what the Dodgers did this offseason, because nobody expected the Diamondbacks to be where they were last year. No one expected that team to be in the World Series. But you look at all the talent, all the power, all the speed, which is huge in this modern day baseball that team has. That is a team that can fire off on all cylinders, and no one is really looking at them to go back to where they were. It was one of those, well, they did amazing last year, but let's see what they can do this year. They have the talent, they have the potential, but again, that Dodgers massive shadow over the rest of baseball just kind of puts away the attention from everybody else. So I think the Diamondbacks can repeat and get back to where they were last year.
We're going to have to do a lot more of Eat This, Not That with Steve Buchanan here in the future. Steve, we appreciate the time, man. Everyone can check you out along with Julian Edlow and our buddy Emerson Lazia on The Sweat every weekend here Saturday and Sunday on the DraftKings Network and on VSiN from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. Steve, we appreciate the time, brother. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys, and thanks, Claudio. Talk to you guys later. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
I'm saying that enough now. I've just gotten myself hungry through the course of the segment there. So,
I'm Gojo and Golic, and DraftKings is in North Carolina, officially live this week in the Tar Heel State. As part of the celebration, the DraftKings Power Forward Series recently visited a special spot in North Carolina that has a tie to one of the NBA's biggest stars. Check it out.
Welcome to Power Forward, Charlotte Edition,
where we celebrate heart, hustle, and hoops on the local. Exploring basketball's most important hoop spots in your city.
Next stop,
Curry Court, Charlotte's most happening hoops hotspot.
Renovated by Steph Curry and the Curry family, and home to Queen City Pro-Am.
Today, we're hanging out with Coach Malcolm Sanders
and Charlotte legend Hezzy God. Let's go say what's up.
Let's go.
So what does this Curry Court mean to the community and to Charlotte?
It means a lot. We've never really had a NBA Finals MVP, Finals champion, and for it to be somebody who was tangible, who we all grew up around, somebody we could touch, somebody we could pull up to the gym and see them ball out from high school even up until, he made it to the pros. That's the biggest influence that, this court provides. It allows the youth to be able to come in here and see that I can do what Steph Curry did.
And with that, it's time for Cash It or Trash It, presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about all that DraftKings has to offer. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. Are we cashing or trashing, guys? A deep run for one of the iconic North Carolina states, as you can see on the board here. UNC with the shortest odds, although still long at 16-1. Duke at 25-1. Gets a bit longer for Wake Forest and North Carolina State. Senior, any of these pique your interest?
Well, I mean, listen, you have to go to North Carolina, right? I mean, we just saw Duke get dumped by North Carolina State. So I think I would cash that one without a doubt as far as the North Carolina teams are concerned. So that would be the way I would go. We'll see. But just happy we got it going now in North Carolina.
Yeah, I was going to say all of this North Carolina love, a good way to welcome our friends in North Carolina to the DraftKings Sportsbook, to legalized sports betting down there. So you got an opportunity to bet on any of these number of schools as we head into March Madness here. Now, what I will say, Dad, is you're right. North Carolina's probably the horse to back. We talked to Jay Will about this and what their future looks like after a bit of a couple of bumps in the road along the way during the season, but absolutely dump trucking Florida State in the ACC tournament. All of that going on here. What I would say is I have found us a hero elsewhere in the Tar Heel State. One of our producers in our ear, could you cut me out of that just so we keep going? But I would say this. I found us a hero elsewhere in the world, in the Tar Heel State. Walk with me on this one. So yesterday, as we mentioned, we had Duke get brought down by NC State. And on NC State happens to be what I think can be one of my favorite stars in college basketball. He is a senior. His name is DJ Burns Jr. And he is a large, large man. Now, I think he only had 10 points in this win, but at 6'9", 275, he authored one of my favorite quotes of college basketball season, which is, I watched a lot of Akeem Olajuwon growing up, and I just ended up with a Zach Randolph build. And so I went back and looked up a little bit more about our thick king, and I realized he's been in college for a while. He's one of the guys that's been around here. He was part of the 2018 recruiting class, and he is from South Carolina. He was the third-ranked player in the state of South Carolina in the 2018 recruiting class. Do you know the two players that were ranked ahead of him in that same recruiting class, Claudia or Dad?
Wow.
Phone a friend.
Wow. I'm not going to know on that. But I imagine
Zion
there's some pretty good
Williamson
names.
and John Morant.
Wow.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So as we had that conversation about those two stars coming out of South Carolina, and we remember all those videos of young Zion going and dunking on a bunch of like 6-foot white kids in the state of South Carolina in that small town he was from. It was him, John Morant, and then our guy, NC State's very own DJ Burns. So someone to keep an eye on as we keep marching forward here. We love big fellas. We saw that with the dude from Indiana State that went viral the other day. And so Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So now we'll do the same thing here. We need a thick-based basketball player name for our guy DJ Burns. At Gojo and Golic on Twitter is where you could do that. So welcome to our friends in North Carolina. We appreciate you having here. Promo code Gojo when you get there on the DraftKings Sportsbook, where you can go and try and cash or trash any of these teams coming up in March Madness or the tournament. Guys, I do want to talk, while we've got a little bit of college crossover here, something we didn't necessarily get to earlier, Dad. A little bit of the tampering fun that's getting thrown around in the NFL right now, and an unlikely source for it, as Penn State's very own James Franklin might be out here getting the Eagles and Saquon Barkley caught up after some comments he made about the conversations that happened between the former Penn State star and the current his team in the Philadelphia Eagles. What do you think that pro day is going to be like if all of a sudden you've got him back in the state of Pennsylvania and he walks up to the coach?
Yeah, how about it, huh? Hey, well, what are we doing here? What's going on? But this tampering stuff between Saquon Barkley and with Kirk Cousins, supposedly talking to a trainer in Atlanta. How dumb is this? How dumb is this? We have a term called legal tampering. Legal tampering that started Monday. And everybody needs to understand, which I'm sure they already do because it's not that difficult to figure out, when legal tampering begins, deals are agreed to within minutes. So are we to believe that legal tampering started and the agent and the team figured out that deal in 5 minutes? Of course we're not. They have been tampering all along. They have been doing deals all along. So to say someone is tampering when you actually have something you actually use called legal tampering, it makes me laugh. It's a joke.
So Penn State head coach James Franklin told a reporter that the Eagles GM Howie Roseman spoke to Barkley and pitched him on the connection between the Eagles and Nittany Lions fan bases. Saquon Barkley has said he misinterpreted our conversation. I don't know why you're talking on other grown folks' business. But Dad, yeah, you're right. I think this is the weird, have your cake and eat it too middle ground that the NFL wants to try and exist in here, where, logistically, there's no way this is possible. We all know at places like the NFL Combine in Indianapolis, there's probably a ton of this legal, there is a ton of this legal tampering going on, and people starting to draw this stuff up on cocktail napkins. And so, the notion of anything happening here, the same deal, Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons under fire for a little bit of this too as well. That there was something here because of what Kirk Cousins said at the podium there, mentioning talking to different people inside the Falcons organizations about this, when in actuality, he is not allowed to yet have that contact. This is the double-edged sword. I said legal tampering, sexy, fun, flirty, exciting. We should lean into that portion of the NFL, coming in on the back end and trying to enforce rules and code and conduct. That's dumb and that's lame. That's much more free agency behavior, and you need to keep that outside of the club right now. We're trying to have fun inside the club.
Yeah, and I don't know if anything's going to be done about it, right? We know a lot of it is because the league year doesn't start until it was just this week. At sometime in March, the league year starts, so you try and back everything up to that and get it all at one spot. Got to be under the cap at that point, make all your moves. But these moves, you're right, are being made all through the season, whether there's talk going on after the season, combine. It's ridiculous what they're trying to keep control of that for underneath the surface has been out of control for years.
This is to me very similar to what we've had going on in college sports right now, right? Where everyone's talking about name, image, and likeness as if it's still, these players can go out there and get money for appearing in an advertisement in a billboard in their town that their college is in, and not this shadow pay for play stuff that's going on. And so they want to talk about it publicly one way, knowing that privately this is what's been going on the entire time. It's the same way with this NFL legal tampering window, where you know exactly what's going on, but publicly you want to act like everyone's still following the rules that we've had. No, we redrew the rules. We've all been playing by these rules, and now it's time for you to either catch up and codify them or to just look the other way, the way that you're supposed to. Kind of like all those police officers that used to give me tickets for parking over by the tennis courts near the Notre Dame football facility when you wouldn't do it all semester, but then you'd come in that final week to make your quota. Pick a side that you're on because you can't unevenly enforce this. And no, I'm not still bitter about this at all. Don't worry. All right, time to finish off the show and the week with this, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you off into the weekend. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us 5-star ratings. Nice ratings, too. Say something nice in the comments section. We love that. I read it. I'm extremely vain. And as always, check us out here on the DraftKings Network live, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. But if you have to miss us or any of our great guests, shout out to our buddy here at DraftKings Network, Steve Buchanan. Came by to talk some MLB this upcoming season with us. You can get that wherever you get your podcast. You can catch the best of Gojo and Golic on VEASAN, noon to 1 p.m. Eastern every day, wherever you get them on the radio or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done. Guys, let's get to this. Some good news in Detroit. Detroit decides to extend their very important core GM and head coach. Brad Holmes, their general manager, and of course, our favorite Dan Campbell, head coach, both extended going into this upcoming seasons. It'll keep each of them with the team through 2027. And Dad, no surprise here. The job that they have done in tandem of talent acquisition on this squad and the receipts they have kept, as Brad Holmes reminded us at the end of last season, he sees you when you're sleeping. He knows what you're writing about this team are now going to be around there, chip firmly on their shoulder, biting kneecaps well towards 2030.
Yeah, this was a great match made in 2021. I think Campbell was hired just a few days after Holmes was hired. And this is a great match right now. I mean, what's going on in the city of Detroit, how far they made it last year. The draft is there this year. So the NFL focus will be on Detroit, at the end of April. And then obviously such an arrow-up team that they have right now. It's great to see. It's great. I think it's great for football, certainly great for the city of Detroit, but obviously great for football, I think, to have one of these teams that has been down for so long to be able to come back and be near the top again, to see if they can, kind of climb the mountaintop. And we just love Dan Campbell because now we can talk about, especially with the influx of younger new head coaches, actually former players like a Gerard Mayo and an Antonio Pierce, you really start to break down the Royal Rumble of head coaches in the NFL, put them all in a ring, and who's last standing. I still think it's Dan, but I think the competition has increased. You lost a little bit when Vrabel left, but you gained a little bit certainly with Antonio Pierce and Gerard Mayo because they're younger as well.
Yeah, and to your point,
strength invites challengers.
I was going to say 6 days after Holmes got hired, Campbell got hired, and then everybody saw Hard Knocks, and including myself, I put a ton of money on Campbell to be coach of the year. So anyways, Gojo, you go.
Yeah, we all thought we were getting the Hard Knocks bump that year, and we thought, maybe we're overestimating this. And no, it's turned out to be everything we could have wanted and more. A legitimate culture changer coach, an organization that seems very aligned, some really good moves so far this offseason on defense with Carlton Davis coming over from Tampa Bay. I saw the DJ Reader signing yesterday, the former Cincinnati D tackle. So lots to be excited about there, and a very important year in that final year of Jared Goff's contract. But Claudia, let's get to that and talk about bees.
Bee invasion on the tennis court. Carlos Alcaraz got a win in the quarterfinal match at the Indian Wells yesterday, but that really wasn't the topic. 2-hour disruption because of bees. Just 19 minutes into the match, bees literally took over. It reminds me of that movie Birds. Like, bees swarmed the camera that's supposed to be overlooking the court. The guy on the microphone's like, hold up, we need to stop. They're trying to swing at the bees. You have to go look at the video because it sounds strange. Like, it's just a few bees. No, it was a full-on bee attack. So it took 2 hours, around 2 hours, for them to clear it. A guy came out with a vacuum and a spray bottle. People were cheering him on, taking selfies with him. It was ridiculous. But yeah, 2-hour disruption for the match, guys. Interesting, Gojo.
So this is an interesting story that to me took a turn before we even got back to this segment. This is a wild thing, but Claudia, just by you saying it's like the Birds, no, it's not. It's like Tommy Boy. It's like the scene in Tommy Boy, okay, with Chris Farley and David Spade, to which, as we brought it up before we came back from this segment, you and another 27-year-old behind the scenes here for our show have not seen Tommy Boy. I'm stunned. Now, I guess with the age and that generation, I guess I can understand it, but that's just one of those that I just feel like everybody saw.
But I guess it's weird because I've seen Birds, and isn't Birds an older movie?
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I have to say it's the
Making
weirdest thing.
Alfred Hitchcock references, but for some reason, Chris Farley is out of the purview of her cinematic experience.
I don't know why my parents, for some reason, showed me certain movies. Like I saw Signs, and I saw Birds, and I saw the randomest movies, but very common ones I never saw. So Birds is my only reference. I'm sorry. I'll go watch Tommy Boy.
You know what? I see, Dan, I'm less surprised by this than you are. Maybe it's because I live in an era now where there's too much content. I always feel bad recommending movies or shows to people because there's too much to watch. Everyone's in their own little corner of the internet. If we all link up every once in a while for like a Love is Blind or something that becomes apartment viewing, great. But in general, I assume most people are at their posts. And it's another one of those things where, like, yeah, Claudia is about 7 years younger than me. Billy, our producer, who I work with at ESPN2, is about 7 years younger than me. Like, I just kind of assume, at some point there was a cliff because that's just kind of how the sands of time work here. I have now found myself becoming a card-carrying old, and if fealty to Chris Farley is what draws the line on that, I'm comfortable living in that truth that is my champion. 100%. 10 out of 10 times. Because you're right, Dad. That was my first thought. When I saw that clip yesterday, my initial reaction was, bees! They're everywhere! Bees! Your firearms are useless against them! Save yourselves!
Now I don't have to watch the movie. You guys just did it for me.
No, you have to watch the movie. Claudia, I'm going to ask about another movie, another comedy I like. Now, this was made like a decade later. Tell me you've seen The Hangover.
I've seen The Hangover, yeah. I only saw the first one.
All right.
Like, I couldn't go see the rest. But yeah,
no,
The Hangover's
that's
funny.
fine. That's fine.
That's good, yeah.
Yeah.
Once Zach
no. The Hangover's great. It's fine that you haven't seen all of them. The Hangover is one of the greatest comedies of all time.
It's hilarious.
Of all time.
Yeah, it's a good one. So I get brownie points back? Am I getting back onto the good graces with you,
That one, because it
Senior?
was 10 years later, I would have assumed you would have seen that one, yeah. Yes. I was a little surprised, but Mike did bring up, and he's right, the generational gap and the age and when that movie came out. I guess I can understand it a little more.
Mm-hmm.
I do wonder how it would hold up for a fresh set of eyes, but that's a story for another day. Claudia, the last story for our day here involves a case of stolen bobbleheads.
It was supposed to be Jaromir Jagr night for the Penguins, but then the Penguins said, actually, that's not happening because somebody stole our truckload of bobbleheads. I get it. You want a bobblehead of the legend, but why steal a truckload of them? So fans got a little voucher so they can get them at a later date. The Penguins released a video with the legend with a little bobblehead next to him saying, buckle up, baby, let's go find your friends. This is interesting. Well, why do people do stuff like this? I don't get it.
This is another reference that I don't think Claudia will get is as soon as I saw this, I thought of the Billy Madison scene. Who the hell would steal 30 bag of lunches?
Yep.
I'll tell you who did it. It's that damn Sasquatch. And somewhere that damn Sasquatch has about 10,000 Jaromir. Claudia, have you seen Billy Madison?
I've seen some of Billy Madison, but I haven't seen the whole thing.
And by the way, the commonality there is the person who stole the lunches, Chris Farley. So we got a connection to both the movies that we're talking about here. Here's what I want to know. Do you think they know what they stole, or they were just out to steal a truck and then find out what was contained in the truck later, or they knew this was all the bobbleheads and they stole it? That's the part I don't know.
100% the former.
Yeah. Well, because
really, you think?
I think they tried to lift the truck. I think they were like, all right, they've probably scouted this out. I would imagine this is a case of mistaken truck identity because I don't know any criminal worth their salt that would actively target a truck with 10,000 bobbleheads on it and say, this is where we're about to hit our lick, fellas. I got to imagine this is like a scene in every movie where they popped open the back of that 18-wheeler and realized, oh my God, we're going to go to jail for the dumbest thing imaginable. We need to find a play to ditch this, get our prints off this, and get up out of Dodge. That was my thought.
True.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I would think there was no way that's a smart, not to say criminals are smart, but that would not be a smart thing to actually plan out and do.
As Jaromir Jagr posted on his Instagram, he's vowing to find them. He said the FBI is already working on it. So good to know the Crawford authorities are on the case of the missing bobbleheads here because we don't have enough serious things going on in this country. Speaking of serious things, if you agree and support this very serious journalistic podcast, download, subscribe, rate, review it. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you Monday.